If you think you know the legends of Africa, think again, because you might only know the sanitized version. The names we grew up with, the Olympians, the Norse Titans, they've had the spotlights for centuries, but beneath the surface of history is a pantheon so old and so volatile that entire empires try to silence it. And after our last dive into some of these African gods, your comments proved one thing. You didn't just want a list of these names, you wanted stories that were never meant to be told. And so we are going deeper, from the cosmic rebel of Mali, to the gods of pestilence, to the serpents that guards the lifeline of Zimbabwe. These aren't just myths, they are forces that shaped the human experience long before the first Greek temple were ever built. So let's peel back the silence, starting with the Thundera in the heart of West Africa. In the Igbo cultures of West Africa, in now present-day southeastern Nigeria, Amadioha is the god of thunder, lightning, and justice. While Westerners might compare him to Thor, Amadioha isn't just a god of thunder. In the indigenous Igbo spiritual system of Ordinani or Ordinala, which means it's rooted in the ground, Amadioha is a cosmic Agbara, like an Orisha in the Yoruba pantheon, a raw, universal force of cosmic justice and lightning. Before we continue, shout out to Techitron for their comments on my last video. It really helped me understand why it was much accurate to call the Orishas in Yoruba pantheon Orishas rather than gods per se. And if you like a shout out too, leave an insightful comment on this video. I'm always open to learning. Now, even though Amadioha is arguably well known, most people do not know the story behind him. His name, Amadioha, means freedom or free will of the people. Amadi in the Igbo language means freeborn. Oha means community or people. He has other names too, like Kamalu, Kamanu, or Fufi. And here's the part that should interest you. In the beginning, Amadioha was created by the supreme god, Chukwu. He was not born a human. He was created as the king of the sky, already divine. In ancient Igbo folklore, Amadioha is actually a creator deity. After his creation, he cast a massive bolt of lightning down from the heavens, striking a sacred silk cotton tree. The tree split open, revealing the very first human man and woman on earth. He is the husband of Allah, the Earth Mother. Allah makes the laws, Amadioha enforces them. He represents the ultimate cosmic balance. When Amadioha sends gentle rains down to fertilize Allah's soil, he is seen as a loving provider god. But when humans disrupt that peace, his wrath is unleashed. Amadioha is most famous as the ultimate judge of the Igbo people. In pre-colonial times, when a crime like murder, theft, or oath-breaking occurs, and the community couldn't find a thief, they turned the case over to Amadioha. He is said to execute justice using thunderstones or lightning bolts. If a person is struck dead by lightning, the Igbo people believe Amadioha has judged them guilty. His judgment leaves two specific signs. The corpse is found with a distinct black mark on their forehead, or the guilty person is swarmed and killed by wild bees. And because a victim of lightning is caused by the gods, it is an abomination to mourn them. The body is left unburied in the evil forest, and all their worldly possessions are permanently confiscated by Amadioha's chief priest, the Umu Amadi. Today, there is a town in River State called Ogiuwu. During the pre-colonial era, Ogiuwu was the home to the Kamalu Ogiuwu Oracle, the grand central shrine of Amadioha. People would travel hundreds of miles across West Africa to visit this shrine to settle land disputes, cure illnesses, or clear their names of accusations. It operated like a supreme spiritual court. If the oracle found someone guilty of a horrific crime, they were often sacrificed to appease his intense energy. His symbols are the white ram, Ebule, his primary animal spirit, representing his aggressive, unyielding, masculine strength. The color red, symbolizing fire, lightning, and war. And the egret, Nza, a white bear that represents his calmer, peaceful side when justice has been successfully restored to the land. Now we move south, deep into the heart of the Zambezi River, where the water doesn't just flow, it breathes. There is something about rivers that human beings have always feared and worshipped in equal measures. Rivers give life, rivers take it. And sometimes the people who live beside them begin to feel that the river itself is alive, not as a metaphor, but as a fact. For the Tonga people of Zimbabwe and Zambia, this isn't poetry, this is cosmology. Nyame Nyame, sometimes called a Zambezi river god, is described as a serpentine deity with the body of a snake and the head of a fish, ancient and enormous, coiled somewhere in the deepest channels of the Zambezi, beyond where any human eyes can reach. His wife lives in the upper river, and for centuries they were never separated. But then in 1956, the British colonial government, in a decision that still carries grief in it, began construction of the Kariba Dam. the largest man-made lake in the world by volume. And to build it, they would need to flood the Zambezi Valley, the same valley where the Tonga people had lived for generations, the same valley where Nyame Nyame and his wife had always been together. The Tonga people warned them. They said, "You cannot do this, you will anger the gods." The engineers, the colonial administrator, as you have guessed, didn't listen. And what happened next? Well, it's something you could explain scientifically, but I'm not sure science captures the full weight of it. During the construction of the Kariba Dam between 1956 and 1959, there were catastrophic floods, freak storms, sudden temperature drops, equipment failures that engineers couldn't explain. In 1957, a massive flood swept through and killed 86 construction workers. Some of the bodies were never recovered. The following year, another flood came. The walls of the dam were damaged. The project, which was meant to be a symbol of colonial modernity, kept bleeding. But the Tonga people weren't surprised. They said Nyame Nyame was trying to reach his wife, that the dam had cut them apart, and that his grief was what was making the river shake. Now, even if you believe in geology over mythology, you have to think about the fact that the Tonga people understood that river in ways no British engineer ever did. They knew its rhythm, its rage, even its patterns. And maybe Nyame Nyame isn't just a deity. Maybe he's the Tonga's people's way of encoding generations of knowledge across the Zambezi into a form that couldn't be dismissed. Well, until it was. The Tonga people were forcibly relocated. Over 57,000 people displaced. They were given dry, infertile land away from the river. Many of them died of starvation and disease in the following years, and eventually the dam was completed. But here is what I find interesting. The Tonga people still believe that Nyame Nyame will one day destroy the dam, that the river will reclaim itself, that Nyame Nyame and his wife will be reunited. And they are engineers today, not spiritualists, engineers who acknowledge that the Kariba Dam is aging dangerously, that its walls are weakening, that a catastrophic failure is not impossible. Now, I'm not saying the prophecy is literal, but I'm saying that there's a kind of wisdom in the myth that refuses to die just because someone poured concrete over it. Nyame Nyame is still worshipped. Carvings of his serpentine form are sold throughout Zimbabwe. The Tonga people still make offerings to the river, and in some quiet, stomping way, the story is still unfinished. Now we travel northwest to the Efik people of what is now Cross River State, Nigeria, and parts of Cameroon. But first, I want you to think about this question for a moment. A question that every civilization, religion, or physiological tradition has had to answer at some point. If a god created humans, why do humans suffer? Why do they age? And why do they die when the gods do not? Well, the Efik people had an answer, and it's one of the most psychologically honest creation myths I've ever heard. In the beginning, there was Abassi, the supreme god, the creator, and there was his wife, Atai. Some say she was his co-creator, some say she was his equal, and some say that she was more powerful than the two of them. And already that starts to interest me, because in many mythological traditions, the feminine force is secondary, decorative, or peripheral. But here, Atai is not decorative. Atai is the architect of consequences. After Abassi created human beings, he became afraid of them. He was afraid that humans, if left free, would become too powerful, too independent, that they would surpass him, or at the very least, stop needing him. So his solution was to keep them close. Humans were allowed to live in the sky with Abassi, but they were not allowed to reproduce. They were not allowed to grow their own food. They had to come and eat at Abassi's table every day, dependent and controlled. But then Atai challenged this. She said, "Let them go to Earth. Let them live as they were meant to." And it was Atai who negotiated the terms of human freedom, while knowing also what freedom would cost. The humans descended to Earth. They reproduced, they planted food, they built communities, and then they began to forget the sky. They began to forget Abassi. And with that, death entered the world. Now here's the part that makes me wonder, and I think it was meant to. Was Atai merciful or punitive? Did she give humans freedom out of love, or did she engineer death as a price of independence? Because she knew that they would never respect the divine if they were truly free. Because in the Efik tradition, it is Atai who introduced death and discord into humanity. She sent both down to Earth to keep humans in check. And this makes me wonder even more, is she the villain of this story? Or is she the wisest character in it? Because maybe she understood something Abassi didn't. That a creation with no limits, no ends, and no mortality wasn't a blessing. It was an experiment gone wrong. Mortality is what makes human life urgent, valuable. It's what makes love feel like something worth protecting. It's what makes a single ordinary Tuesday feel irreplaceable, when you know there are only so many of them. Atai, to me, isn't a god of cruelty. She's a god of truth, the uncomfortable kind, the kind that says yes, you are free, but that will cost you everything. Now, some myths are about justice, some are about creation, and some, well, are about what happens when someone refuses to accept the order of things. The Dogon people of Mali carry one of the most physiologically compressed mythological traditions in the world. Cosmological systems so intricate that 20th century anthropologists were genuinely baffled by how much the Dogon seemed to know about astronomy, about Sirius, about stars, invincible to the naked eye, centuries before even Western telescopes existed. In the beginning, the supreme god Amma created twin spirits called the Nomo, luminous, divine, the blueprints of perfect order. But Amma also created Ogu, and Ogu was restless from the very start. Before his creation was even complete, Ogu broke free. What a rebel. He tore himself from the cosmic womb prematurely and descended to the earth, scattering chaos as he went. Why? Because Ogu wanted his twin. He wanted his feminine counterpart, his soulmate. Amma had promised but not given him yet. And you know what? This actually reminds me of Frankenstein. Ogu couldn't wait, he couldn't submit, he couldn't trust the process. And in that impatience, he contaminated the earth. He introduced disorder into the world that was meant to be harmonious. Amma, in response, transformed him into the pale fox, a trickster figure, half animal, wandering the earth forever incomplete, forever searching for his twin that he will never find, because in his rebellion, he lost her. Now, I keep returning to this myth because I think it's one of the most physiologically precise stories ever told. Ogu isn't evil. He's not malicious, he's just impatient. He refuses to wait, he refuses to trust, and his refusal cost him everything he wanted. And that makes me wonder how many people have been destroyed by the very thing they were reaching for by grabbing it too soon. The pale fox in Dogon culture is associated with divinity. Priests would draw patterns in sand and leave grains at the edges. Overnight, the fox would come and leave its tracks. The position of its paw prints were read as messages from Ogu, the cosmic rebel who turned a reluctant oracle, the one who broke the world and now helps people navigate it. There is something contradictory about that. A god who disrupted perfection now spends eternity offering guidance in the imperfect world he created, as if the universe said, "You made this mess, you have to help people survive it." Now we go back to the Igbo cosmology, and I need to understand something before I tell you about Ekwensu, because he's one of the most misunderstood figures in all of African mythology. Even for me as an Igbo person, when Christian missionaries arrived in Igbo land, they needed a name for the devil, a symbol of evil, chaos, deception, and they chose Ekwensu. And in doing so, they took one of the most complex, morally ambiguous figure in Igbo spiritual thoughts and flattened him into a simple villain. Ekwensu was never the devil. He was something far more interesting. Ekwensu is the Igbo deity or Agbara of bargains, war tactics, change, and the unpredictability of markets. He is the god of the wilderness, the unexpected, the transformative disruption that precedes growth. Yes, he is also associated with mischief and chaos, but not evil exactly, not in a Christian sense. Think of him less like Satan and more like a force of reality that tests you, a cosmic pressure that reveals who you really are when the plan falls apart. In Igbo military tradition, warriors would invoke Ekwensu before battle, not because he blessed K, but because he was the master of strategy, of confusion, of turning your enemy's strength against them. He is the deity you call on when you need to outmaneuver or survive by intelligence, rather than brutal force. Which kind of reminds me of Athena, the goddess of war and strategic warfare in Greek mythology. Ekwensu is also deeply connected to transformation. Markets in Igbo culture were considered places where not just goods, but fates were exchanged, where things change hands, including destinies, and Ekwensu presided over that energy. The unpredictability of it, the way a single transaction could change the entire direction of your life. Some Igbo scholars today argue passionately that the Christian rebranding of Ekwensu as a devil figure was one of the most damaging acts of cultural erasure in the religion, because it didn't just rename a deity, it made it dangerous to honor him. It made people afraid of a force that their ancestors had understood, respected, and worked with for centuries. And personally, I think about this a lot, because the story of Ekwensu isn't just about mythology. It's about what happens when one cultural story is written over another. When you take a nuanced truth and replace it with a simple lie, you don't just change the story, you change how people see themselves. Among the Edo people of Benin, a civilization that built one of the most sophisticated kingdoms in pre-colonial Africa, death was not a random force. It had a name, it had a face, and that face belonged to Ogiuwu. Iwu in Edo language means death, and Ogi means to bring or give. Ogiwu is not simply a god associated with death. He is its administrator. In Edo cosmology, every human being at the moment of their birth is given a specific fixed amount of blood. That blood represents your life force, your time. Ogiuwu doesn't randomly hunt the living, he waits, he monitors, and when the blood runs out, when the measure with Sanoboa, the supreme god assigned to you at birth, is exhausted, Ogiuwu comes. He is described most times as a powerful king, draped in red, because red is the color of blood, both life and its end. He rules the underworld called Anyanwu, the spiritual realm where the dead resides between death and reincarnation. Because in Edo belief, death is not the final, it is transitional. Ogiuwu collects the dead and delivers them to a process of judgment and rebirth. And if you are familiar with Egyptian mythology, Ogiuwu is very similar to Anubis. But here's what interests me about Ogiuwu. He is not feared the way you might expect. He is respected, honored even. The Edos do not pray to be spared from Ogiuwu forever. They pray for long life, enough time to live fully, and then they accept that Ogiuwu come. There is a maturity in that worldview that I think we've largely lost. Modern cultures is almost allergic to death. We don't talk about it. We medically delay it at enormous cost. We treat it as a failure rather than a conclusion. But the Edo people built a theology that says death has its own lord, order, and dignity. It says, don't beg to escape it, just use your blood, your time, wisely. If you have ever lived in Benin City, like me, then you might have heard people crying out, screaming, Ogiuwu, Ogiuwu, whenever a young person dies early. And now I understand why they were crying. They weren't crying because the person died. They were crying because the person died too early. They were questioning, asking Ogiuwu why he came too early. In ancient times, the priests of Ogiuwu were called upon when someone was dying, not to cure them, but to help them transition, to ease the passage, to ensure that Ogiuwu receives them properly. In that way, they were the first hospice workers, the first people to say, dying is something that deserves care, ritual, and presence. Ogiuwu is not the villain of the Edo story. He is the ending, and sometimes a good ending is the most important part of the whole story. Now we move to the Niger Delta, to the Ijaw people, one of the oldest indigenous groups in Nigeria, whose culture and cosmology run as deep and complex as the Delta waterways themselves. Egbesu is a world deity, but calling him that feels inadequate. He is not a god of aggression or conquest. He is a god of righteous defense. There is a distinction the Ijaws make that I find profoundly important. Egbesu does not protect those who act unjustly. His power is granted specifically to those who are in the rights. The way it works is that a warrior who is pure, who has observed the proper rituals and committed no injustice, and enters battle for a legitimate cause, can be rendered invulnerable by Egbesu's grace. Bullets will not penetrate them, blades will not cut them. They became, for the duration of the just conflict, something superhuman. And then there is the other side of that belief, which is equally important and often overlooked. If a warrior who has claimed Egbesu's protection commits an act of injustice during battle, if they harm an innocent, if they fight for corrupt reasons, the protection leaves instantly. Egbesu withdraws, they become human again. This is one of the most sophisticated concepts of divine justice I have ever encountered in any mythology, because it's not just about power, it's about the moral conditions of the person wielding that power. It says, strength is not unconditional, it is earned, maintained, and justified. In the 1990s and early 2000s, during the Niger Delta's resistance movement against oil company explorations, movements like the Ijaw Youth Council's Kaima Declaration, the name Egbesu was invoked. Young men claimed his protection as they confronted some of the most powerful corporations on earth, backed by the Nigerian military. Some of them believed absolutely that they were invulnerable, that Egbesu worked with them. I don't know what to do with that. I generally don't, but I know this. The people who have been stripped of land, poisoned by oil spills, ignored by the government, and left to drown in the wealth extracted from beneath their feet. The people like that reaching back to a God who specifically protects the righteous and the wronged. That's not superstition, that's dignity. That's a refusal to accept that power belongs only to those with helicopters and lawyers. Egbesu stands for something ancient and urgent, that justice has a force behind it, and that force is not silent. Among the Igbo people, the sun is not just a star, it's a deity, and not a distant, impersonal one. Anyanwu, whose name literally means eye of light, or eye of the sun in the most literal form, is one of the most luminous or deeply revered forces in the Igbo spiritual world. Anyanwu is simultaneously the physical sun and the divine consequences behind it. In many traditions, Anyanwu is feminine, a woman, the eye through which Chukwu, the supreme god, sees the world. She doesn't just illuminate the earth, she witnesses it. That idea, the sun as a watching eye, is both beautiful and quietly unsettling because it means nothing is hidden. Every act committed in daylight happens under her gaze. Every seed that grows does so because she is watching it. Every road you walk, every word you speak in the open air, Anyanwu sees it. In Igbo thought, Anyanwu is also deeply connected to healing and knowledge. Light in this tradition is not just physical, it's epistemic. To bring something into light is to understand it, to heal it, to make it whole. There are Igbo herbalists and healers who specifically invoke Anyanwu when treating illnesses, not as superstition, but as a reminder that healing is a form of illumination. You bring what is hidden inside your body out into clarity, and clarity itself becomes medicine. What I find remarkable is how this compares to how many other cultures, even in Africa, treat the sun as masculine. Ra, Apollo, Surya, they're all fierce, powerful, dominating, and masculine. Anyanwu is powerful, yes, but the power here is observational, nurturing, witnessing. It says the highest form of cosmic power isn't force, it's clarity. It's being seen completely and still loved. We live in a time when people curate every image they present to the world, when entire lives are performed for audiences, and Anyanwu's theology says something uncomfortable to all of that. You are already fully seen, the eye has already been opened, there is nowhere to hide, and there is nothing to hide from. Not all sacred things are beautiful. This is something I think mythology understands better than most modern storytelling. That the divine does not always arrive in forms we find comfortable. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a hyena. Among certain communities in the Lake Chad region, particularly in Hausa folkloric tradition, Bulutugin refers to a class of human beings who can transform between human and hyenan form. The word itself roughly means I transform myself into a hyena. They are not demons in the traditional sense. They are not vampires or monsters imported from outside. They emerge from within the community. They are your neighbors, sometimes your family. The Bulutugin were believed to gather at night, particularly in graveyard, to perform rituals, feed, and commune. By day, they worked as ordinary people, and here's the part that disturbs the community who hold these beliefs. You cannot tell who is one. The transformation is hidden. The night self and the day self coexist in a single body. Now, I want to be careful here because beliefs like this have historically been weaponized, used to accuse and isolate people, particularly women or outsiders. And that shadow should not be ignored when we talk about the Bulutugin tradition. But I also think there's something deeper in this story that deserves attention. Because every culture has a version of this myth, the person who is two things at once, who wears a respectable face in the light and becomes something else in darkness, the double life, the hidden nature. And in choosing the hyena specifically, there is an ecological intelligence here. The hyena was deeply misunderstood, associated with death and filth, but also one of the most intelligent and socially complex animals in Africa. Hyenas are matriarchal. They are problem solvers. They were feared and despised, partly because they thrived where others saw only waste. Maybe the Bulutugin represents something more nuanced than simple fear. Maybe it represents the part of human community that cannot be fully domesticated. The hunger that civilization doesn't eliminate, it just teaches you to conceal. There is a question that every cosmology eventually has to answer, and most of them try to judge it anyway. Not boldly, but quietly. They skip over it the way you skip over a crack in the pavement. And the question is, where did the gods come from? Not the universe, not humans, the gods themselves. The Fon and Iwi people of what is now Benin and Togo did not skip this question. They answered it with Nana Buluku. Nana Buluku is the supreme androgynous deity, the original cosmic being, beyond gender, beyond time, beyond the categories we use to understand existence. She, and the feminine pronoun is often used, even though she contains both, exist before the god Mawu and Lisa were born, because Mawu and Lisa are her children. She gave birth to them, and then, in one of the most profound gestures in all of African mythology, she withdrew. She created the creators and then stepped back. Mawu became the moon, feminine, cool, connected to mercy and wisdom. Lisa became the sun, masculine, hot, connected to strength and justice. Together, Mawu Lisa created the world and everything in it. But the force behind both of them, the source behind the source, is Nana Buluku. I keep thinking about what it means that she withdrew, that after creation she became remote, not absent but no longer interfering. She watches, perhaps, but she does not intervene. And in many traditions, she is not worshipped directly because she is too far above the ordinary reaches of prayer. She is more like a principle than a personality, more like the ground beneath the floor than the room you stand in. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the most powerful force in the universe is the one that doesn't need to show itself, the one that doesn't need credits, the one that creates something magnificent and then simply lets it live. Nana Buluku is the grandmother of all things, and like certain grandmothers, her power is the most visible in everything that came after her. And finally, perhaps the most paradoxical deity in this entire exploration. In Yoruba tradition, there is a god who brings smallpox, who sends disease into the world, who is worshipped not despite this, but because of it. His name is Shopona, or Obaluayé in the diaspora, particularly in Candabo in Brazil, where he is also known as Omolu. He is the god of Earth's surface, of infectious disease, of healing. He is draped in raffia that covers his entire body. Some say because his skin is marked by the very disease he commands, that he himself bears the scars of what he inflicts. He moves slowly. He carries a broom of palm fronds called the shashara, which he uses to sweep disease from the earth, or alternatively, spread it. In fact, he does both. And here is where the theology becomes genuinely uncomfortable and genuinely honest, because Shopuna does not simply represent disease as punishment for sin, though that reading exists. He represents something more complex, the inseparability of sickness and healing. The fact that the same force that can devastate a body is the same force that, properly channeled, can restore it. His priests in Yoruba land were among the earliest practitioners of inoculation in West Africa. They understood variolation, the practice of introducing small amounts of smallpox material to create immunity, centuries before Edward Jenner was born. Let me say that again. Shopuna's priests were giving smallpox inoculations while Europe was still dying in plague waves. In colonial Nigeria, the British banned the worship of Shopuna specifically because the priests controlled public health information, including who had been inoculated and who had not. That knowledge was power, medical power, political power. The colonial government couldn't control a population whose health was administered by a deity, so they criminalized him. I think about that every time someone says the African spiritual tradition were primitive. I mean, the god of smallpox had priests performing preventive medicine. The god of disease was also the god of its cure. That's not primitive to me. That's a level of medical philosophy that Western biomedicine still struggles with. The idea that the same thing that can make you sick can make you immune. Obaluayé is feared. He is also beloved. He is the god no one wants to speak of too loudly, because to say his name is to invite his attention. But he's also the god the suffering calls on when nothing else works, when the doctor has said what they can say, and when the body is at war with itself and all ordinary weapons have failed. He stands at the crossroad of suffering and survival, and he knows better than any other force in any mythology that those two things are never as far apart as we want them to be. And so we began in the sky, with a god of thunder who embodies justice. We moved through rivers, rebels, tricksters, war, death, invisibility, light, the grandmother of all things, and a god who carries disease and cure in the same hand. And what I keep returning to across all of these stories is that these myths were not created to entertain. They were created to explain the hardest things, the things that do not have a clean answer. Why do we die? Why do the innocent suffer? Why do the powerful abuse the weak? Why does the earth sometimes feel like it's punishing us? Why is the person who heals you sometimes the person who hurts you? Every single one of these deities lives in the uncomfortable space between the question and the answer. Africa did not lack mythology. Africa did not lack philosophy. Africa did not lack gods even. What it lacked was an audience willing to listen. And maybe now, finally, we are becoming one.